in a society where man is not allowed to exist without work. Why does man have to work in order to be alive? Well, it all starts with patriarchy. Patriarchy starts with this biophysical theft and logical reversal. Patriarchy steals wombs for men, let's say. One man, one womb, thereby erasing the mother, and justifies this mass theft by taking value away from Mother Nature and from Mother, and giving it all to things cultural, to culture. Rather than value the forest, for example, or the fertilized woman, patriarchy values the use of the forest, lumber, or the child, the colonization of the womb or of nature. It's the same concept. And this was done for thousands of years. It took advantage of men's physical strength in order to use them to enforce this setup, this reversal. This reversal necessitated like a vast cultural change, which is how we invented language, economy as we know it, and all of like the cultural reality structures that we have around us that have replaced how we were in nature, which we don't know. So here we are now. Are men responsible for what happened 7,000 years ago? No, I don't think that any of us are responsible for our forefathers or foremothers' sins or should pay for it. And I feel that all of us should finally be able to have the pleasures of family and even heirs and children if we want, without entering into these patriarchal transactions that were enforced on our ancestors. So, separating kind of like our words from our realities and keeping our eyes fixed on facts rather than traditions is very important here. There is something that I call a UMI father, a universal mother income father. But before I get into it, I want to get into what I think a man is. A man in our culture now in the 21st century and in patriarchy has been a person who provides for others, who takes care of others, right? Who puts himself last, but is mistaken for a user of others. So the easy route for feminism has been to allow women to play the same role as the men, right? The easy way has been to fit into our masculinized culture, and everybody acts and reacts like we're all men, and we act in a rush, and we lose touch with the feminine, all of us, and we work to make money, and we ignore what's in our heart or in our instincts, and whatever. The monetization of like intimacy and sexuality, whether conscious or unconscious, is one of the forces that push us into this, but it devalues our humanity. So regardless of our moral views of like sex, dating, sex tourism, male brides, millionaire match, The Bachelor, Ashley Madison, whatever, dating apps, etc., serial marriages, or even like the general sexual revolution, sex lib has been turned in the 21st century into a business that keeps patriarchy, which is dead, artificially alive, right? And female identifying people profit directly from charging for their sexuality in all kinds of ways, which perpetuates a separation of self from sex and gives primacy to the payer, the client, the customer, the viewer, whatever we feminists call the male gaze, which devalues what we call the feminine, the female. But in a way, this is not a gendered difference. It's a financial difference. So whoever is paying, again, it plays the role of the male in this setup, in this sex exchange. Demonetizing sex in our lives, I think, is very important. And it starts in our heads. Finding our truth in our romantic exchanges is worth the loss of income. It's worth the sacrifice to get out of the dominant system. to give up our false sense of security, our false sense of like legal propriety, of being in control, our false sense that we're loved when we buy love, right? And I think that we all, men and women, need to remove ourselves from this production machine and reproduction machine so we can develop conscious awareness and identify our own triggers and responses to our accumulation of wealth as our main goal in life. And liberating sexuality from its intense monetization consciously is a first healthy step to self-liberation, self-dignity, self-understanding, because money in exchange for sex enables and empowers the domination, subordination, binary hierarchy that controls all of our society. In our social structure, we're trained to consider it normal that the body, especially the female body, is subordinate to the mind, especially the male mind, and is paid little for the labor that only the female body can do, which includes birth and motherhood. So the monetary distribution system we adhere to rewards sexuality, sex appeal, attraction, but not procreation on motherhood. And then the wealth goes directly to the children and is received only when the children continue the setup of patriarchy, right? So this monetary dependency is what keeps us trapped and kind of like, gate kept in the obsolete morals of like marriage, right? Monogamy, family as it used to exist before the reproductive changes in the 20th century. We still, however, have like shame. We have sexual shame, we have procreative shame, we have wealth and poverty shame, status shame. There is a lot of social tropes that are being used by society at large to keep us normative in the old system that victimizes men and women differently, but I'm talking about the men for thousands of years now, by forcing them to be the working machines and to be the sole providers and to be the protectors and defenders, to be responsible for others, often for life, to die for the collective in war, by refusing women their full bodily independence, procreative independence, forcing them to be dependent on marriage, on fathers, on husbands, and putting this huge heavy burden on men as a result. So this reproductive debt translates to men being dependent on the woman who bears his children. He has to pay off his procreative debt to her. So he gives up his freedom and becomes, in a sense, socially enslaved. And the children are the barter, right? It was the most ancient trade. In the way that patriarchy enslaves both parents in unnatural, unnecessary ways and perpetuates itself by raising new children in this claustrophobic, artificial, incestuous, highly controllable group that is the, nuclear family that conflates sex with parenthood and love with abjection. Even now, where like abortion is legal, divorce is legal, men and women still cannot figure how to love each other well and fully and honestly in family or outside it. They walk on eggshells, right? Because intimacy is still kind of like a trade-off, and we don't know exactly what we're trading anymore. We're not that different from like the Greeks in Plato's age, right? Plato already in like 500 BC viewed the intellectual world as more important, valuable than the physical embodied world, right? So he already lived in patriarchy, and that's how we still evaluate things, even though it's thousands of years later and the conditions are completely changed. So we have discovered new continents, all these sciences, reproduction has changed completely, and yet we're still kind of stuck repeating what was passed down to us thoughtlessly. And I think that's what's at stake here, is this unspeakable reality, the collapse of the patriarchy, which has occurred You know, the temple is down, Samson has brought it down, and men's procreative debt to women, for women to let him share her womb, is no longer necessary. So, you know, appearances are deceiving, and like culture is just an appearance. It's a mitigation, it's a metaphor, it's a metaverse, right? But in reality, we are our basic, natural, foundational first principles, right? So I think that having hacked access to paternity and artificial insemination, we are no longer deluded that men are needed and essential in procreation, right? And women are therefore more in charge. Men have more problems with like suicide, alcohol, kind of like confusion about what their masculinity is. Military conscription is no longer required. The old natural rites of passage to like manhood are no longer required. So like a lot more use of drugs and alcohol. It's something like 45% of men do not become fathers. You know, single mothers' wages have stayed the same over like 30 years. Single men are less happy. It just all the recent data shows really worrisome trends and a surplus of single men, right? So marriage basically is broken. We all know that. And it's becoming an increasingly elite institution, as is parenthood, so that only people who are making enough money can get married, especially get married multiple times, and have children, especially multiple children. So marriage does not make people really change. Often, you know, their social class, it doesn't make them change, right, their race or their economic outcomes. That is really rare, right? Women still can marry up. It's highly unlikely for men, especially given like immigration rules for marriage. Women have more of an opportunity to kind of move up through marriage, but at what price? At what cost of, again, one's truth? So I think that we need to reframe this whole issue of our like interpersonal romantic relationships and try to take money out of it, try to take the economic pressures off the men on whom, you know, they're heavier, and, you know, see what is left, basically. And the way to do this is to pay for women who become mothers, so that it's not up to the individual men to do that. I think that especially with all the changes in globalization, deglobalization, deindustrialization, loss of jobs, less stable jobs, there is so much, you know, to unpack in our daily reality, and our mass addiction to patriarchy, which is no longer needed because we've broken the paradigm of patriarchy, has to end. So otherwise, like, I don't see the difference between, you know, selling sex and selling, you know, a kidney. Like, it's just basically ethically the same. We need to live closer to our truth and closer to nature, and in order to do that, we have to kind of take a break from selling so we can understand the value of things, the actual value of things, and develop our consciousness. And then we can have relationships and exchanges with each other that are more humane and radically honest. So, you know, the way that, you know, the way that family wealth is passed down is one of the most formative social controls. And we know that that's why many young men try to get rich fast, like giving all their money to crypto. That's why, you know, many women try to make money of their own so that they can control their children through their inheritance, effectively kind of like buy them out. There's also like a competition now between high-earning parents, mothers and fathers, because both control the family wealth to a great extent. or high inheriting mothers and fathers. So, but all of this kind of like supports my argument that human equality can only be reestablished by paying mothers worldwide for their work, because that's something that is the same amount of work for women across the globe, and it can give the new generation of children similar circumstances, financial circumstances that they're born into across the planet. And if it comes with a mandatory education, basic education, it gives them all kind of a same understanding of what our culture is about across the planet. So the extreme inequality begins to get mitigated. Without that, you know, the basic right to having children, to having emotional compatibility with one's partner, to find happiness in marriage if you want to, you know, be married, all of those basic rights of people are limited by the necessity for money, by the extreme private financialization of what's our, you know, our most human interactions. Including our connection to our parents. You know, how many people are disinherited as punishment, or, you know, rejected by their families and ousted, so they can't really speak their truth and express themselves because of the horror of that. So, you know, finding this truth necessitates, of course, bravery. And you know, I think we need an underground railroad for you know, men and women, especially you know, those who are well off, in order to kind of get away from the control of, you know, patriarchy and live a life within society, not as outcasts in the desert, where love is not slavery, right? Where our understanding of love is based on actual exchanges that are, you know, beyond enslavement, beyond financial manipulation, which is a devolution, a moral decline, right? And a kind of like, it has a disregard for human life and integrity, our own and that of our loved ones, that is not unlike disregard of slavery. So the thing to do is pay off the debt of manhood. How do you pay off this kind of like endless mounting debt of manhood? Well, you know, by liberating men from patriarchy, from the need to support the women who are going to have their children. And that's why I think that paying mothers is a way to get all of us, especially men, who are the most oppressed, free from the incentives of patriarchy that have remained intact in our current existence as a post-patriarchy.